Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down big ideas. Today, we're diving into Robert Greene's controversial classic, The 48 Laws of Power. Now, this is a book that treats power not as good or evil, but as a timeless, amoral game with some very specific and sometimes ruthless rules. Wow, that single sentence from Voltaire just perfectly captures the whole vibe of this book. It's this high-stakes world where your entire life can flip in an instant, all based on these hidden rules. So yeah, let's unpack what those rules really are. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to explore this pretty cynical worldview by looking at 3 key laws as little case studies: how to manage the people above you, how to influence everyone around you, and how to protect yourself. And then we'll step back and really think about what it means to be a player in this so-called game of power. Okay, let's start with a power dynamic that probably sounds familiar to a lot of us, the one between you and your boss. And believe me, Greene puts this law first for a reason. It's the one most of us have to deal with every single day. The number one rule in Greene's playbook is really a warning, and it's all about perception. This isn't about hiding your talents or playing dumb, not at all. It's about making sure that the person in charge always feels secure, always feels brilliant, and, well, always feels like they're the master. To really get this law, you need to hear the story of Nicolas Fouquet. This guy was brilliant, totally indispensable to King Louis XIV of France, and he loved to live large. When the prime minister died, Fouquet was absolutely certain he was next in line for the job. But he started to feel like the king was a bit cold to him, so he came up with a really big plan. His grand idea? He would throw the most incredible, most magnificent party the world had ever seen at his brand new castle. And the guest of honor? The king himself. The goal was pretty simple. Impress Louis, show him how loyal he was, and remind him just how valuable he was to the kingdom. But there was one huge, fatal problem. The party was an absolute triumph. The food, the fireworks, the setting, it was perfect. So what was the big mistake? Well, Fouquet thought he was showing his devotion, but the king? He saw something completely different.
You see, Louis XIV didn't look at Fouquet and see a loyal subject. He saw a rival. He saw his own court, his own people, being more wowed by his finance minister than by him, the king. This wasn't really about treason. It was about ego. Fouquet's brilliance just made the king feel small and insecure. And the result? Just 3 weeks later, Fouquet was arrested and locked in prison for the rest of his life. He was replaced by a man named Jean-Baptiste Colbert, who was, competent, but totally bland and unthreatened.
Okay, so if making your boss feel secure is rule number 1, how do you handle everyone else? Well, Greene's advice is surprisingly similar. It's less about being right and more about managing other people's egos. And this brings us right to law number 9, actions over arguments. Greene's point here is that winning an argument is, well, it's a hollow victory. Yeah, you get that moment of feeling smart, but you also create resentment. You make an enemy, and that can come back to bite you later. True persuasion, he says, is way more subtle than that. Okay, for example, get this. There was a Roman military engineer who was ordered to send a large ship's mast to be used as a battering ram. The engineer knew for a fact that a smaller mast would work better, and he argued and argued and argued to prove his point, and he was right. But the consul, his boss, felt like his authority was being questioned, so he had the engineer flogged to death for being right. Now, let's contrast that with the absolute genius architect Sir Christopher Wren. A nervous mayor insisted that Wren's design for a town hall needed extra support columns. Wren knew they were totally unnecessary, but did he argue? Nope, he just built them. Years and years later, workmen doing repairs discovered that the columns stopped just short of the ceiling. They were fakes. They served no purpose except to make the mayor feel secure. And this just nails Greene's point, doesn't it? Arguing just makes people put their walls up. But a demonstration, that's visual, that's real. It just bypasses all that resistance. Wren got what he wanted, the mayor felt safe, and the building was a masterpiece. He proved his point without saying a single angry word. The lesson couldn't be clearer. Show, don't tell. All right, so we've talked about handling your superiors and your peers. Now, let's zoom out and look at your overall strategy. You know that feeling when you're under attack and your first instinct is just to retreat, build up your walls, and hide? Well, according to Greene, that is the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. So this law is a huge warning. A fortress looks like the safest place to be, right? But cutting yourself off from the world actually makes you more vulnerable, not less. You stop getting valuable information, and you become this big, obvious target for your enemies. I mean, just look at the first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huangdi. This guy was arguably the most powerful man in the world. But as he got older, he got super paranoid. He built this insane network of tunnels and secret passages so no one would ever know where he was. He thought he was protecting himself, but what he was really doing was cutting himself off from reality. His power became brittle, and his entire dynasty collapsed right after he died.
Now, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you've got the French statesman Talleyrand. This guy is amazing. He served under the king, then through the French Revolution, then Napoleon, and then the monarchy again. How on earth did he survive all that? Simple. He never isolated himself. He was always out there, talking to everyone from nobles to criminals, making sure he always knew what was really going on. He was shielded from his enemies by being a part of the crowd.
So after all these stories of vanity and persuasion and paranoia, what's the big takeaway here? What is this game we're all supposed to be playing? When you put these three laws together, you start to see a very clear, if, let's be honest, deeply cynical view of the world start to form. Power isn't about being good or bad. It's about understanding and, exploiting basic human nature, our vanity, our insecurity, our tendency to believe what we see over what we hear. It's a social game, and it requires you to be strategic, always.
Now, just to be clear, this explainer isn't an endorsement. We're not telling you to live your life this way. It's just an examination of this framework, this idea that sees all human interaction as a constant, subtle dance for power. In this world, how things appear is everything, and direct confrontation, that's for amateurs.
Which really leaves us all with the central question the book poses, doesn't it? Is this a pragmatic guide to navigating a tough world, something that can help you defend yourself and reach your goals? Or is it just a recipe for a life of constant suspicion and manipulation? And that's something worth thinking about in your own life.